Hello, welcome to my little trip down road testing memory lane. Thank you very much for your questions and comments as always, and especially some of your reaction to one of the things we were talking about last week in how bikes are good for your head. I can read a couple out actually. First one's from Mark Hindle. I've always loved bikes because when I'm riding I only concentrate on the bike and my surroundings for safety reasons, which means all the bad things in life are blocked out. Great therapy that I've benefited from for 44 years now. Great post, and thanks for talking about mental health issues this week. Bikes are brilliant therapy, as you and many others already know. Moto 97, glad you touched on the mental health deal. So important, and it's crazy how the demons leave when I'm out riding. Rage Rider, great vid. I personally find riding really therapeutic as I enjoy the solitude, distraction and excitement it brings. I hate the idea of riding in a big group or connecting my phone up to the bike, etc. It's pure escapism for me, which is priceless. Yogi Moto, great content yet again, highly enjoyable. Speaking as a qualified meditation and yoga teacher, I can confirm that the act of riding a motorcycle is indeed a form of what's referred to as an active meditation among professional teachers. There's an often quoted saying that you'll never see a motorcycle parked outside a therapist's office. Usually the hardest thing to do is to get the motivation to actually get ready and get out on your bike. But if you can manage to do that and go for a ride, you'll be feeling better by the time you return home. Nomad Lad, fair play for addressing the last question. It's not an easy one to address, but bikes most certainly are a brilliant outlet and cross-communicating platform for people to connect. And if someone is feeling down and out, it's usually a connection of some sort they need. And Paul Red, another great video, sir. Motorcycling is one of my happy places. For the chap who's feeling a bit down, I totally get it. I can't stress enough how much getting some exercise helps. Going for an early morning walk before the pressures of the day take over does wonders, and an added bonus is getting fit will improve your riding too. All the best to that chap. Well, yeah, thanks for all your comments. Talking of walks, and we all know that Baron von Grumble on his Instagram channel has got a place where he does videos and he goes for walks and he kind of just basically chats about how he feels. And he also did that great video series Permission to Talk on his own channel where he rode his GS to Europe, which was fantastic and very inspiring. So yeah, you can't really talk about this stuff enough because it affects a lot of people. I've been on my travels, not abroad this time, but more locally. I've been testing the new BMW R1300 GS against the old 1250 GS around the MCN 250 route. It's a 2-day test more or less, a day of photographing and a day of actually riding the route. Between the 2 days you've done a lot of riding. We also included in that test, we weighed the bikes, we dynoed the bikes, we've ridden with a pillion and everything in between. So we've done a thorough test and the results are quite interesting actually, especially if you're thinking of moving from a 1250 to a 1300. And it's one of those tests that a lot of people criticise going on launches. And, you know, like everyone says, launches are a good first taste of a bike. You get a pretty good idea of what the bike's like, but MCN takes it a stage further. And when the bikes come back to the UK, we put them through these really thorough tests in more real world conditions. And also do a bunch of other feature tests as well. So that test is coming out in a few weeks in MCN the newspaper and MCN the app if you're not in the UK, and that's well worth taking a look at. Somewhere I'm not at the moment is the EICMA show in Milan. I wish I was. Fantastic new bikes coming out for 2024. I think it's probably the most exciting group of bikes for a long time. Quite a lot of sporty bikes there. I really like the look of the Yamaha XSR 900 GP in the Marlboro colours. I mean, if that doesn't bring back memories, nothing will. And also the GSXS 1000 GX Suzuki, which is kind of like an S1000 XR type bike. They look great. They're my two favourites at the moment. I can't wait to ride those. So let's crack on with some questions, shall we? That's why we're here. First one is from Moto Zest. Nevesy posted a question about changing the ergos of the Speed Triple 1200 RS a few weeks ago, but you never answered it. Well, I did see a question. I'm harvesting everybody's questions in a neat little file, and every week I basically do a lucky dip and pick out a bunch of questions. So I will get around to answering everyone's question. I'm going to be doing these weekly when I can, when I'm not on launches and time permitting. So hopefully I'll rattle through everyone's questions, and because they're not really time sensitive, I don't really think it matters if there's a bit of a delay. But thanks for this one. Thanks for reminding me. I realise it might have been a bit too specific. It was about making it more comfortable for street riding by fitting Apex 4-inch risers adjustable for reach, height and angle, so I generalise it. Why aren't manufacturers giving us the chance to refine the ergos of our sports bikes? The slightly adjustable foot pegs of some models is nowhere near enough. If you could easily adjust your clip-ons for reach, height and angle together with proper adjustable foot pegs, I bet a lot more sports bikes would be sold. The fairing clearance issues would be a simple matter of redesign. Why is this not a thing? Well, very interesting question. I think that's basically come out of talking about a Street Triple or Speed Triple 1200 RR, I think, which is one of the most uncomfortable bikes of modern times, along with the BMW R9T Sport, just because there's a long stretch to the bars and the bars are quite low. So you quite a lot on your wrists, and you haven't got the ability to hold yourself up with your elbow on the tank. You're always on it. But yeah, I think it would be good, wouldn't it, if bikes were much more adjustable? I mean, that's one of the reasons people don't buy sports bikes anymore. I mean, the other reason is they're hideously expensive. But a lot of bikes are slightly adjustable, aren't they? You know, adventure bikes, you can adjust the bars up and down, adjust the seats up and down. Some sports bikes you can adjust the foot pegs a little bit. I know the GSXR 750 and 600 of the mid-noughties, you could do that, three-way adjustable. But none really let you make big changes, the kind of big changes you describe, really. You know, having a bike with clip-ons for the track or sporty riding, and then being able to change it so you sat right upright. I think one of the reasons, you know, once you've got over all the clearance problems and longer hoses and longer cables and cutouts in the fairing to allow the bars to turn properly, you know, full-on production bikes that are sold by big manufacturers have to be safe, and they are tested for years and years and years, within an inch of their lives, to make sure they're tested, every component from the shape of the fairings to the type of suspension, the type of tires and everything in between. They've got to be safe, stable and safe. That's the number one priority for manufacturers. As soon as you really change fundamentally the riding position of a bike, it completely changes character. Then you start needing to make sort of pretty substantial chassis changes to take those into account. So, for example, if you've got a Tuono and an RSV4 Aprilia, you'll find that the suspension is set slightly differently, the power delivery is set slightly differently, the geometry is slightly different, all to take into account your new riding position. As soon as you start sitting up on a bike, all of a sudden the weight goes to the rear. So on a naked bike, you perhaps need more support on the rear, so the bike doesn't kind of slap when you're going fast with all the weight off the front of it. You might need a softer front end, so when you're burying it into the corners where you haven't got the weight over the front wheel, it will still turn nicely. You might need slightly softer power, whereas with the sports bikes you want a slightly stiffer front end because you're over the front anyway. You can have aggressive power, it doesn't matter because you're all over the front, won't wheelie as much as it would do. I mean, 2013 we took an S1000RR with the help of BMW Park Lane. We took the fairing off of it to see what the new S1000R might be like before it came out, and it was almost unrideable. It was an animal because even though we kept the bars the same, because the power delivery was so aggressive, all it wanted to do was wheelie, which wasn't so bad. It was good fun, but it's not very livable. So, you know, that's taking it to the extreme. So I think if a manufacturer made the bikes really adjustable, they'd run into problems with making it completely safe and stable, because they don't want anyone to have a crash. But what I would say is you're kind of getting to a point where we're having our cake and eat it with some new bikes and some new sports bikes, middleweight bikes anyway, unfortunately not the big ones. You've got the R7, you've got ZX4R, you've got RS660, Honda CBR 650R, all of which are sporty bikes with quite upright riding positions compared to a super sport bike. They're kind of livable. And then you've got these new bikes for 2024. You've got the GSX 8R, same kind of thing, looks like a CBR 650 really. Quite upright bars, quite sporty, can't wait to ride that. And that XSR 900 GP, which is relatively kind of upright as well. So you know, maybe you won't need a bike that's that adjustable. I know that a lot of people have commented on your comments saying that they've taken their sports bikes and put straight bars and they've been fine, and I'm sure they are, but a manufacturer needs to make sure their bike's 100% safe. Or you buy a sports bike and a not so sporty bike, which is even better for the manufacturer. But that's a really good question. Thank you very much. Sorry for the delay in replying. Next is from Graham Smythe. Hi, really enjoying these videos. Thank you very much. I'm fairly new to biking. Do you think it takes a few bikes before you know what you really want? I've gone from a 125 to a CB500X Cross Runner and now a Triumph Street Twin. All great bikes there. Nice progression. I definitely think it takes a few bikes before you know what you really want, but the reality is you never really know what you want, because your tastes change throughout your life. You know, just speaking from personal experience, I've been a sports bike nut all my life, all the way till I joined MCN, and then I got to kind of try other types of bikes and realise there was more to life than just getting your knee down. Not a lot more, but there is. And in recent years, adventure bikes and tool rounders and nakeds have all got decent performance. They've all got the performance and the handling and the equipment that sports bikes used to have. So riding those is kind of a pleasure as well. So yeah, your tastes are always changing. So you've gone from a 125 to a couple of upright bikes and now a retro. You know, you might get into track days soon, or proper off-roading, who knows. But yeah, just go with it. Don't pigeonhole yourself, because yeah, your taste will always change. But yeah, really great question. Thank you very much. Next, STP 7049. Thank you for your question. I'm wondering how riders take themselves into account when evaluating a bike's performance. As an example, in the dry, my bike feels agile and gives loads of feedback. Same bike in the wet, my bike can feel reluctant to turn and I feel disconnected. I see here a classic case of leanophobia, with stiff upper body and altered sensory processing that I have to manage in the wet. As a professional, easy, the most important instrument you use to test your bike is yourself. So my question is, do you and other road testers have to calibrate themselves for, say, a good day or a bad day, whatever that means when you're on a road test? Great video series, thanks. No problem, thanks for your question. Well, thank you for calling me a professional. Nicest thing anyone said to me this week. I don't think that road testers really need to calibrate themselves, because we are lucky enough to ride every single day and do a lot of miles on bikes. Everything is pretty much second nature. You know, you can kind of ride a bike on autopilot to a pretty good level. Definitely on the road. Sometimes on the track, it takes a while to kind of get your mojo in there, you know, just because the risks are higher, the speeds are higher. There's much more technique for the track, and you know, yeah, it's not an easy thing riding a bike fast around a track, especially when you're thinking about what to write and all the other road testy stuff. What I would say though, you know, your bike gives you lots of feedback and it's agile, and in the wet it's reluctant to turn. So, you know, some of that might be you just not being confident in the wet, but it might be the bike. You know, if you were to take a racing bike as an example, because it's the extreme example. If you rode it around a dry racetrack, it would be the sweetest handling thing in the world. But as soon as you ride it more slowly and the tyres cool down, or if you ride it in the wet, it becomes a different bike and it makes you feel differently. So you might have a bike that's maybe quite stiff and it doesn't work very well in the wet, and that's not giving you confidence because you haven't got the weight transfer on the front tyre and the rear tyre when you're accelerating and braking. It's making you tense up. And your tyres might not work very well in the cold or the wet. You might have very sporty tyres, and sporty tyres don't warm up very well. And when they don't warm up, there's a lack of grip, especially at the front. And the lack of front grip manifests itself in a real reluctance to turn, real heavy steering, which will make you feel like the bike won't kind of rail around a corner because the tyres are so cold. So yeah, it might just be the bike that's your problem in the wet and not you. But yeah, I remember back before my MCN days, and I definitely had good days and bad days, just because when you stop riding for a period of time, you kind of got to get up to speed again. But you know, the road testers, you know, we're living on two wheels, and you don't get that, which is a really nice thing. But thanks very much for your question. The next one is from Colin Perry. Great content and easy, especially on riding tips. No problem. I was wondering, any tips on riding on steep down hills with turns? I always feel I'm loading the front too much, even though I use a lower gear. Lock my knees into the tank and try to keep my body weight off the bars on my GSX-R 750. Any tips appreciated? Fantastic bike. Yes, the big tip for going downhill is to use lots of back brake. You know, you're on the road, so you're not, hopefully, piling into hairpins at breakneck speed. But yeah, if you use a lot of back brake, it basically pulls the back of the bike down, keeps it more level, and it takes a lot of the weight off your wrists. And if you drag the back brake into the corner as well, it will help it turn. So I guess when I'd normally on a bike, I'd be using 80-20 front and rear brake. Perhaps for a downhill turn on the road, I'll probably use 50-50. And you know, dragging that brake really helps to take the weight off the front wheel, and it's just such a great tool to have in your riding armoury, the back brake. Not just for stopping power, but it's all about how stable it makes the bike feel. I've said it before, it's like you've got a third wheel when you've got a back brake. You know, once you master it, you wouldn't believe how much more stable and how much more comfortable you are on the bike. You know, that also goes back to the previous question in the wet. You know, if you're using more back brake as well, the whole bike feels more planted, and dragging a little bit of back brake into the turn will help it turn easier as well. Obviously, you don't want to stamp on it and lock it up. GSX-R 750 hasn't got ABS, but you know, learn to feather it, learn to use it more, and you'll find it will really help you in all corners, not just the downhillers. But great, thanks for your question. And finally, from June 701, I've seen you put a lot of questions in, so thanks very much for those. I'll get round to them. The MT-09 SP is a bloody fun bike, and for 2024 new changes seem to check all the right boxes. And we're talking about there in the previous video where we talked about what's the best hooligan bike. About the ultimate hooligan from MT-09 SP, 690 SM CR or 701 SM or Hypermotard is the only way to increase the fun without compromising manoeuvrability. Yep, I'd agree, all those bikes are fantastic. Question: if you go for a 20-day plus journey across the continent, your once in a lifetime sort of trip, what bike would you pick, the ultimate bike for a trip? Great question. I would choose right here, right now, the age I'm at, kind of adventure style bike, really, just because they're so roomy. I think back in the day I wouldn't have thought twice on going on a super bike. That kind of evolved to doing lots of touring on super nakeds, which I still would because they're quite comfortable. But having a Triumph Tiger 1200 Explorer GT a couple of years ago really kind of opened my eyes to how enjoyable touring can be on a bike that's not trying to wreck your joints all the time. So I would take the Triumph, because that 1200 Explorer GT is easily one of the most comfortable bikes I've ever ridden. That includes any adventure bike, any touring bike, any sports tourer, and then everything in between. Triumph have just got it right. The seat's perfect, the riding position's perfect, the screen's a bit noisy, that's the only disadvantage with it. But sometimes it's not, if the wind's in the right place. It's not the sexiest bike. It's not the bike I ever look back on and like lusted over. It's not the bike I would look at over a cup of tea and just drool over. But in terms of doing a job and getting you to the places you want to and seeing all the amazing scenery, it's just brilliant. It handles superbly. You know, with the right tyres on, you can just ride it like a supermoto in the corners. Accelerates hard, it's fast, it's got loads of toys. It's got a nice character to the engine, like with that T-plane crank. It's a little bit like a KTM in its kind of the noise and slight vibration. I don't feel any vibes off the bars like some people might. So yeah, pretty boring answer, but it's the Triumph Tiger. Well, that's it. Thank you very much for sticking with it, and we'll see you again on the next video soon.